St. Mark's, of course, the famous basilica in Venice. And Venice had been able to stay independent from northern invaders. They basically are built in a swamp in the middle of a lagoon in the Adriatic Sea. So their position offshore meant that they could defend their city to a greater extent. It would be easier for them, very difficult to invade, and therefore they can remain independent and also continue to develop wealth, whereas everyone else had been conquered and their wealth is being sapped off in other directions. Venice had very close ties to the Byzantine East. It's an important trading post between the European West and the Byzantine East. And the city itself tried to model itself after Constantinople. Of course, this will lead to other problems later on, but we haven't gotten there yet. The church itself is constructed to house the relics of St. Mark. He had been said to have preached in Venice or in the area. Venice didn't exist at the time of St. Mark, but in the area. And he was killed in Egypt, and then his remains were said to have been discovered and brought back to Venice to rescue his body from Muslim occupation. St. Mark's is actually the third church on the site and definitely the most grand. It wasn't actually completed until the 1200s, about the time of the sack of Constantinople. The exterior is a combination of Byzantine, Islamic, and Western Gothic motifs. So all of the spires, the sense of verticality such as it is on the facade, comes from the Gothic, from the French Gothic. The Byzantine give us these domes. Islam will give us pointed arches, will give us the use of the onion dome rather than the use of a strict dome. For example, the central dome is very much an onion dome, so it almost curves down under itself, giving us that sense. In terms of plan, we'll go back. In terms of plan, it's a Greek cross plan, so you can see that Greek cross around the central dome. And then we have additions. For example, the atrium or narthex being built around it. The interior is lavishly decorated and has been renovated over time. So some of these images are Renaissance images where they're paintings on top of the tile surface, and some are actual original mosaic. The mosaics are likely Byzantine, but they were played up with Western motifs. What am I talking about? When we look at Byzantine, we tend to see specific images. For example, Christ Pancrator, or the Virgin Mary as Theotokos, as the Virgin Child. But we don't see as many narratives. Here it is surrounded by narratives. They're focusing on that teaching element or didactic focus of the murals to create something that's going to be more powerful for the parishioners and more useful in terms of teaching people about the general theology of the Catholic Church. As we look closer, we can see the difference between the Renaissance paintings and the original Byzantine mosaics. The paintings later on take on even more of this narrative form, whereas many of the mosaics tend to be a little more Byzantine in style. They're not as three-dimensional. For example, we can pick out these angels as being Byzantine, or these figures in the dome, the figures of the apostles, as Byzantine, whereas, for example, the angels here, in this case, looks like St. Michael, would likely be, in fact, a depiction added in the Renaissance or later periods. Just looking at the style, looking at the form, the focus on the body as opposed to those angels and saints, angels and apostles, where we see clothing with no apparent body underneath it. That's usually one of the big symbols or big signs that we're looking at something that is Renaissance versus something that is Byzantine.